Hello.
Turn it up loud, but bring them all out. Turn it up loud, but bring them all out. Turn it up loud, but
All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Dial In. I'm your host, Alyssa Pimentel. Thank you for spending this Sunday night with us. I'm really excited about tonight's podcast. Before we get into anything, we always start with thanking our sponsors, also thanking RF39 Productions, who is in charge of putting this whole thing together here with the lights and the cameras. So shout out RF39. If you're not following them on social media, you need to be. But I do want to give a special thanks to our sponsor, ProTax LLC, which is so on brand with everything we're talking about tonight with finance and money. So ProTax is based out of Zion. They are wonderful. So when we're talking about taxes, I love talking about taxes because I pay them directly to the IRS, but ProTax is still offering tax returns. So if you haven't filed yet and you need to, you can definitely reach out to them. They also do ITIN number applications, notary services, travel consent letters, and other important documents. So if you missed a deadline or you just want to start preparing for next year's, whether you're 1099 or W-2, you definitely want to reach out to ProTax LLC. You can reach them at 847-246-8033. And thanks again to ProTax. Now, before I get into my wonderful guest, I do have a disclosure I got to state because we're talking about special stuff tonight. So I'm going to read it directly from the phone just to make sure that we are on brand with everything. The disclosure is that the information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered financial or legal advice. You listeners are encouraged to consult with a verified financial advisor, credit counselor, or legal professional regarding your specific situation. That's huge. Everybody's situation is so different. What worked for your aunt might not work for you. Everybody's situation is different. All opinions expressed are those of the speaker and do not reflect the views or any affiliated institutions or organizations. Now that we got that out of the way,
The fun part.
the fun part, I can go ahead and introduce our wonderful, one of my good friends, somebody who's always been there, somebody who helped me, a community leader, somebody who's doing amazing things. I could go on and on and on, but I'm here to introduce Brandon Ewing.
Super excited to be here. Thank you for having me on. One of my favorite topics, especially for the community, is around credit and all things credit. And so thank you for opening up your platform.
I appreciate you being here. I appreciate everybody who's come on, and especially people like you who have so much knowledge in something that we could all kind of learn from and dabble in and maybe open up some new brain connections. So
I hope so.
So thank you. So Brandon, before we get into the tips and the tricks, of course, non-disclosure, once again, everything ain't for everybody, all right? Tell us a little bit about maybe your background and how you know some of the things that you know.
Yeah, so I learned from experience. So I remember I currently work for BCU, local credit union here in the Northern Illinois area. I was making a transition from events and public relations. So I get this job at this credit union. I don't know what a credit union is. I don't know what a bank is. But I happened to go to a job fair. And at the job fair, met wonderful person who's like, hey, you would be great as a banker in one of our branches. I've never been in finance, right? I picked my major of political science because it meant that I could avoid taking math, right? But I go and I apply for the job. And as part of the job, there is a background and a credit check. So background check comes back, all clear. Credit report comes back and they're like, hey, so there's some things on your credit report with us being a credit union that we need you to address. Otherwise, it may mean potentially we can't hire you, right?
Right.
So I wrote a letter, explained them, created a plan in order to take care of them. They accepted my letter, and I started at BCU, where I've now been for 10 years, right? But imagine having an opportunity denied just because of a number, right?
Yeah.
But that number means so much. And so that started my journey on understanding credit, right? Being at a credit union, doing loans. So I started off as a universal banker, and part of my job was loans. And so I had to, when people came in and they needed to buy an auto loan, they wanted to consolidate debt, credit cards, all that stuff. I used to do the applications, and I got tired of telling people no.
Yeah,
right?
It's very exhausting. Yeah.
So it was what can I do, and how can I help our members and then the community at large understand credit, what it means, how to improve it, right, and maintain it. And so that is kind of what started. I'm a certified, what they call financial coach, but it's the Credit Union National Association. That's my accreditation, right? And so all things credit and all things budgeting are two of my areas of expertise.
I love that. And I got to also kind of talk about our relationship with this as well. You've helped me build my credit. BCU has helped me build my credit. So, with me I think when I got into real estate, I didn't understand how important that score was. And seeing all these people get denied for a home loan because, we weren't really properly taught about credit. And that's something we talk about all the time. But when I'm seeing these people get denied and denied and denied, and then I pulled my credit, I'm like, I got to practice what I preach, because how am I going to sit here and tell people, oh, you're not approved for this? I have to be an example as well. And maybe I want to buy investment properties, whatever it is. And so I learned real quick being in real estate that credit is honestly, and this is something I talk about a lot, it's more important than the money you're bringing in.
100%.
It's in my opinion.
And it could be, right? So and I'm sorry.
Go ahead. We got water there. You're good. I'll drink with you.
So it definitely, it could be. If you have cash, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's what hurts us. So I have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs. They're very cash heavy, right? Mm-hmm. So they can walk in and they may be able to buy a $25,000 to $30,000 vehicle cash, right? Some people are blessed in that they've been able to buy a home cash, or they have parents who can help them out, right? And so what happens is they go through life using cash, and then there becomes something like you talked about, an investment property that you may want, and you now have to have somebody else, a bank, give you money in order to purchase something. And that credit score, what it means, I always tell people, the analogy that I give when I'm teaching our young folks, I do a lot of things with high schoolers, and I say, if you give me $20, and I say, hey, Alyssa, I'm going to pay you back in 1 week. If I don't pay you back in 1 week, how likely are you to give me another $20 when I need it?
Right.
Now, imagine if I say, hey, Alyssa, give me $20. I'm going to pay you back in a week. Week comes, I don't pay you back. But then I go and I ask Rob, I say, Rob, I need $20 more. Now, Alyssa is going to say, don't give him any money because he didn't pay me back.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what a credit score is. A credit score is your financial it's your character, right?
Yeah.
And that's how banks and financial institutions look at it. It's your financial reputation,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And so the credit score, when you don't know that, you go, oh, it's not that big a deal, but it can be.
It becomes a big deal, I think, because like you said, there's so many. My first 3 houses I bought cash. I was like, who needs a credit score? I'm buying them cash. And it wasn't until I wanted to buy something that I couldn't buy cash that I was like, well, what do I need to do? And now I'm looking at my credit score and I'm like, wait a minute, it's not where it needs to be. And I think, there's so many misconceptions that we're going to kind of talk about tonight, and so many different scenarios. And once again, everybody's scenario is different. But it really pains me when I see my entrepreneurs, my 1099, all these people who are making great money, and they want to go get a loan because they're like, I know I can pay it back because the income is there. and the lender and they say something like, well, I could put 30% down, 50% down, and the lender still denies.
Yeah, it's like I don't care. Well, in which you have a tax business that is your sponsor. Those are two different things, which we won't get into. Is a lot of it is income, because also how are you claiming your income? Because you may have a great credit score, but if you write off everything.
Oh my God, that's a whole other conversation, because I get people all the time, especially my entrepreneurs, who they might have that great credit score. They might be bringing in $200,000 a year and they want to afford $1 million property, and maybe they can't afford $800,000, $1 million. But when they're filing their taxes, they're trying to look for every single deduction. And now their net proceeds, what they're walking away with, they're saying is $20,000. And now the lender's like, yeah, your credit score is great. Everything else is great here. But you don't make any money. It's coming in, but you're writing it all off. So that's so many different things. And definitely, we're shout out once again to ProTax.
Exactly.
We're gonna have
to
get them out. That's a whole other conversation.
Yes.
But it all, I think, as we're becoming adults and we're wanting to do these purchases, and we're wanting to talk about wealth, and we're wanting to talk about generational wealth and what we can leave behind for, because these conversations have to happen, whether it's learning the hard way or whether maybe it's a young person watching this podcast tonight and saying, oh, I'm gonna be proactive and whatever. So,
and you've been great about that. Most people learn in real time, right? Especially coming from our communities and where we come from, is it's not always taught in schools, or when it was, we may not have paid attention, right?
Yeah.
It's not the most fun topic. But what we have to do, the earlier you start, the better it is. And what I learned also being in a financial institution and having individuals who come from money or have those conversations with their family, and they were doing things like adding their children onto the credit cards at 15, so that by the time they got 18, they had 3 years of credit history already, right? And maybe even giving them a credit card with a very small limit of $500, because if that child maxed out that card, hey, mom and dad could come in, they can explain, the harm that happened, as opposed to if your first card is a $5,000 card and you are 22.
Yep.
And you max that out, that's going to be a different impact than it was at
Yes.
500. So that's definitely something that I have been able to learn in my
You've also
experience.
been really great about that. And that's the thing, we learn firsthand. I have parents who are like, what do you mean? If there's a $5,000 limit, I'm going to spend all of it. And they should help my score because I'm going to pay it all off next month. But we're not taught the utilization and the percentages. So getting into this, first of all, credit score, you would define it as, like you said, your financial character. When the banks are looking at you, somebody says, well, I got the cash. Why does my credit score matter? You don't have all the cash. You're going to need a loan. They're going to look at you and see, are you trustworthy with the money that we're going to give you?
Your ability to repay.
Your ability to repay. So it does matter. I can't stress that enough. What would you say, when you're in this position and you're seeing all these things, are the top 3 or 2, we'll just start with 1, things that you see that maybe people don't know that you can speak on when it comes to credit, building credit, or any mistakes that you see most commonly?
Number 1, credit can be your friend, right? So a lot of times the other piece that I see is we are afraid of credit because either our parents had horrible experience with credit, or they told you don't need a credit card. You don't need to do those things. No, you need to understand it so that you can utilize it. It's a tool like any other tool, right? And when you know how to use it, it can be very beneficial for you. So the first thing that I would say as a tip is don't be afraid of it. There are so many resources that exist today in order to help people understand their credit and credit score. But what I kind of start off with is, what is good credit?
Yeah.
So a lot of people, it moves and it continues to move. But what I would say is the way that I always learned and labeled it, so you have sub 600. So this is anybody whose credit score is under 600. That means that you have some challenges, right? It's not the end of the world. It's not over, but that's where you see a lot of denials. If your credit score is at 580 or 420, right? There's some things that are going on that you want to get control of, is because in that range, you're going to see a lot of denials. 600 to 650, there may be some challenges. It's either young credit, high utilization. You may get approvals, right? People may say yes, they may give you that auto loan, but you're going to pay a higher amount of interest, right? Because of that. So then you have 650 to 700. If your score is between 650 to 700, and we use school, consider that like a C plus, B minus, right? You're going to get approved for a lot of things. You're going to get a better credit score, but maybe you're not going to be approved for the higher limits. Maybe you're not going to be approved for the most expensive car at the lot, but you will get a lot of yeses, right? A lot of doors are going to open once you get above 650. That's one of the first hurdles. Everybody says 700. You get above 650, you can get a lot of things.
Yes, yes.
And then the next stage, and where most people want to be, is 700 or higher, right? In 700 or higher, you typically qualify for the best rates. You typically qualify for higher dollar amount loans. And those are beneficial for a number of reasons that I'm sure we'll get into. But that's kind of the first thing, is kind of understanding where you are today and then creating a plan. I always say to just get to the next tier. Because what you have is some people who get to 700 and they're like, great. And it's like, well, can you get to 750?
Right.
And kind of look at it at 50-point increments, right? Just to be able to move throughout that. And you'll go up and down. I go up and down based on different actions and things that I'm doing, stuff that's going on in my life. But my goal is to try and always stay above 700.
And to that point, when we're talking about increments, I'm gonna always, in everything pretty much, because it's my life, other than my children and God and my husband, but I'm always going to refer it back to real estate. When we're talking about somebody who's asking for down payment assistances, one would assume that the people with, the lower credit scores typically are going to get those down payment assistances, and we refer to that as DPA, down payment assistance. So we would assume in most instances that the people who need it the most are maybe the challenge credits. It's actually the opposite.
Right.
My lenders and most lenders give the down payment assistance or credits or anything like that for somebody to bring the least amount of money to closing to those who are 650 and above in credit scores. So it's, there's a lot of reteaching and like relearning, and sometimes it wouldn't make sense to a lot of people. Like, why would somebody with excellent credit and who's making money, because they just get it somehow.
Yeah, they get it because I'm basing it off of who's most likely to repay me.
Right.
And your income has nothing to do with your credit score. There are people who make great money, but they don't manage it well. There are people who make great money, but all of their credit cards are maxed out, right? And that's going to impact their overall score and their ability to repay. And that's also something where you call lifestyle creep, where the more money that you make, the more you spend, which means that you're not really managing your money well. Whereas someone who may only make $45,000 a year, which is a solid income, right? And they may be at a 700 or higher because they are managing their finances,
That's
right?
so true, Brandon.
So
Yes.
I tell people, money does not, mean that you automatically have good credit. And many times it's the opposite.
And that it is many times the opposite. I have clients who make so much money, but their money managing skills is horrible. They're spending more than what they're bringing in. And then I have clients who are buying houses and no shade to this job, but it's the mindset, who are working at McDonald's, who were able to buy a nice house because they managed their money well, they saved a little bit, and they mostly took care of their credit. So credit is so, so, so important. Once again, this is a live broadcast, so if anybody has questions, feel free to ask it in the chat. Okay, so we know a little bit about, what the credit score is. We know a little bit about, what we just talked about. What would you say factors in credit score? Let's talk about that. What are the factors? What makes the credit score?
Number one, and this is the thing. So what can you do to get a better credit score, to maintain a credit score? Pay your bills on time.
Talk about it, Brandon. Man.
35%. So if you look at 135% of your overall score, doesn't matter the bureau, is payment history.
Okay.
And why this is so important is because a lot of people make the mistake of, hey, my car note was due on July 1st. It's July 13th. So I'm just, I'm SOL, so I'm not going to make the payment, whatever, or I'll wait. Well, no. So the credit bureau reports at 30, 60, and 90 days.
Right.
So if your car was due July 1 and you made the payment by August 1, it was never reported late. So paying on time just means making sure that you pay before it reports late.
Which is 30, 60, and 90 days.
90 days, right? And so if things happen, life happens. If you miss the 30 day, try and get caught up before it hits 60. Is because 60 impacts the credit score more significantly than a 30-day late. And the more times that 60 days late reports, the worse in impact that it has on your score. Same with 90. So if you get to 60 days, again, life happens. Try not to let it get to 90. And then what a lot of people don't understand is with charge-offs is the charge-off is significant, but the issue wasn't the charge-off. They're like, oh, I went to charge-off. That's why my credit score dropped. No, it was every late payment reported before that organization or institution charged off or sent that file to collections. So payment history is the number one thing that you can do, and it makes up 35% of the score.
35% of your score is made up by payment history. I love that. And a lot of people, I tell my clients all the time, they're like, oh my God, I missed a payment. I'm like, well, how long was it? They're like, oh my gosh, it was due 10 days ago. I'm like, make a payment right now if you got the money, because it's not going to report to the bureau until it hits that 30 days. So just because you're a day late, 2 weeks late, and even when we're talking about mortgages, which is really all I know, right? They even say in there, hey, you've got like a 2-week grace period
before it even reports.
Even reports, but it's when we're starting to go a little bit further. I'm going to read some of these comments.
Go for it.
So Nydia says, our younger generations need to understand that 3 different bureaus and credit monitoring companies like Credit Karma and those scores. Ooh, we'll talk about that. And then have you heard of the 15-3 rule when making payments? That's by Pray Vega. Thank you guys for interacting with us. What's the 15-3? Do you know about that?
I do loosely. So read it again, 15-3-3.
Have you heard of the 15/3 rule when making payments?
No, what I don't call it 15-3. What you have, what I believe they're referring to is, and this is where we get complicated, paying it before the statement cycles. And so some individuals, like I've been told, which I consider to be inaccurate, but consult your credit bureau person,
Disclosure.
is if I make multiple payments during the month, and we're going to use a credit card as the example, that will boost my credit score.
I've heard that too.
And it's not wrong if you're dealing with someone who is struggling to manage their money. Just like we talked about that late payment, your payments only report once a month as well. So if I pay $300 and then $300 and then $300, that's $900. It's going to report that in that 30-day cycle, right, while that I paid $900. Not that I made 3 additional payments, but what it will do is it can help bring your balances down faster. What it could do is it can ensure that you don't ever have any late payments because you're meeting at least the minimum responsibility on there. So it's not a bad practice, but as a way to just do this and it will boost your credit score, I think you have to understand why it's boosting the credit score. You are paying more than the minimum. You're bringing your balances down faster, which saves you money and allows you not to get any late payments. So it's a good practice. Yeah. But like people are like, oh, I just made extra payments.
Right.
Yes, but if in the reverse, if I had $300 that I paid, and then I went to the gas station, I went out with my friends, and I went out to dinner, and I charged that $300 right back. It's a wash. Nothing was reported. Nothing was so it didn't matter. Now, what's important is, and this is a pro tip, so if you want to call it pro tip, is finding out your statement balances. So what's important is to pay down your credit cards as close to zero as you can, as it's comfortable for you, before the statement date cycles. So the statement date, like for me, I know mine with my BCU card is the 5th. So try and pay my balances down as much as possible. Even though it's due on the 1st, the statement doesn't generate to the 5th. So again, if I paid it on the 1st and then charged it back up on the 2nd, and then it reported on the 5th,
right,
it was a wash. Nothing happened except for I made an on-time payment. They're not like
tracking every single move. They're looking at it over a period of time. They're not looking at every single thing that you're doing.
And so what happens is if I know it's on the 5th, I pay it on the due date on the 1st, then I don't use it again until the 6th, until after I know my statement reported. And if it reports very close to zero, the lower that your balance, and when we talk about balances, I think that's a great transition without jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
So if payment history is 35%, utilization is 30% of your overall score.
We're already at 65%. We're
Those
already
are the 2 biggies.
50, yeah.
Those are the 2 biggies.
Okay.
Do you pay everything on time? And how much of your, what they refer to as available credit. So if I have, for simple terms, $1,000 credit card, I should not be carrying a balance more than $300 a month.
That's
30%, right? And so any amount that I have over the 30% is starting to impact my score. If your score has reported with maxed out cards, all your cards are maxed out, and let's say you're at a 580, paying off your credit cards to zero would see your score gain an average of 100 points. In 30 to 6. That's how significant. If I'm paying everything on time,
right,
and I'm a 580, the only way that can be is my utilization, right?
Okay.
Is I'm maxing out my cards. And so paying down those cards is how the quickest way you can actually rebound a score. And we can talk through that.
Yeah, because a lot of people, to that point, like I said, I do these home buyer classes, and credit is such a conversation. And quick plug to BCU too. Anytime anyone's like, I don't know where to go, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm like, go see Brandon, go see Lena and everybody over there, and the whole crew. They're so wonderful. They help me. But they think that maybe if why is my credit score not growing? And I tell them, well, how much are you spending? What's your credit card limit? Of course, once again, I'm not a credit pro, right? But I just asked them because of the things that I know, and they said, well, I got a $10,000 Macy's card, and I spend $10,000, but I make the payments every month. But you maxed it out,
and that's the issue. So, those are the two. So the two big buckets. If you take nothing else away, pay everything on time, and keep your balances as close to zero as possible. That doesn't mean you can't use your credit card. I get cash back on my credit card.
Yes.
All that. And honestly, when I get better and my cash flow is better, what I want to get to is the point where I put all of my bills on auto pay from my credit card. Why? Because I earn cash back.
Yeah.
And so if I pay all of the things, not the luxuries, not the I want to go shopping, not the vacations, but hey, I know every month ComEd is taking as much as ComEd is taking. If those things are set up on automatic payments, I'm never late on those, right? I'm earning cash back. And then when you are great with your finances, you set up your credit card to be paid in full at the end of the month. And that is really where you are going to see big gains. You're not paying any interest. Why? Because if you pay off the credit card in full before the next statement cycles, you're actually never paying any interest.
You're getting paid back.
So there are a ton of benefits to doing it. But that, even for me, that's a long-term goal. I'm not as liquid as I can just make sure that, so I watch my balances and I utilize credit in what is an effective way for me based on what my financial goals are at the time.
I think that's so good. And so many, you go to store. I went to TJ Maxx today, right? Like, Alyssa, would you like to save 5? I hate when they ask me that question, but I get what they're trying to do. Would you like to save 5% today and sign up for a TJX rewards card? And I'm like, no, because you're not a necessity.
Right.
So, one of the big things I tell my friends and some of my family and everybody is, try to put the credit cards how Brandon's doing on the things that are necessities, the things that are coming out every month anyways. Try not, if you want to ball out, whatever. I put my wedding on a credit card one year because I was like, whatever, I'm gonna get heck of points back.
You're doing that.
But I know I have the money already in my account to pay it. So I never suggest you put things on a credit card, and life happens, like you said, right? But if it's, a dinner or something, you don't have it and you just want to rely on the credit card, that's where we start getting in trouble. I personally buy things on my credit card if I know that the next day that I can make the payment, that the money's already in the account. That's just how I like to function. Everybody's different and life happens. Some people lose their jobs.
Yep.
And with that, when I thought about getting in a credit card and talking about utilizing one because I was so scared because my credit was horrible, Brandon. I think I was in the 4s, you guys. I was bad, and now I'm not. I'm up there.
So you're the testament that it can change.
Fixed.
Yeah.
It can be
when you
fixed.
understand it, you know what to do and you know how to move.
And there's people out there that can help you, but you also have to retrain how you're thinking of what a credit card is. Like you said, it could be a powerful tool. It's not free money.
Woo.
It's not free money.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
And so unless for me, like I said, unless I can go pay it tomorrow, I put things like my gas on there. I get rewards back from my gas. There's so many benefits to having a credit card, even like flying, depending on what kind of credit card you have.
Right. And that is how the people we aspire to be, like those that are in the multi-millions and manage their credit very well. That is how they utilize it. They care about the benefits of the card. Anybody will give them a credit card. they're above 750, right? Anybody, what are the perks? What are the benefits? And how do I maximize what I'm gaining in flight mileage and, vacation? Maybe I want upgrades through Delta, right?
Yes.
So they're able to play credit card offers against each other is because we're all competing for them. Why?
Because they pay it back.
Because they pay it back. But every time you swipe it, right, they call it interchange income, right? So there's a fee that are paid just to swipe the credit card, right? From the person that you're buying from, the merchants, all of those. And the more people that you have swipes,
The more money you're making.
money that they're making, right? So you want those individuals, but you do. I don't want to, as a financial institution, give someone $5,000 and then not have them pay me back, because that means that I can't give the next person the $5,000, right? And the domino of how it all falls. So the two biggest, payment history is 35, then it's 30%. Everything else comes down to
what is that?
is kind of history.
Okay.
So 10 to 15, depending on the credit bureau. The account type is how they explain it. So if you only have a credit card or only have an auto loan, sometimes that's what I'll see. Somebody stuck at like 630 and they're like, I'm not moving. What do you have? Well, I only have my auto loan, which is called an installment loan. These terms, I know I don't want to be too heavy. But the installment loan means, like, when you brought your car, you said, I'm going to pay $450 every month for 5 years. And at the end of that, I own my car. So meaning there is a set monthly amount that you pay. And at the end of a term, so 5 years, you will own that vehicle. That is called an installment loan. That reports to the credit bureaus a particular way. So if you have someone who that's all they have and they're at like a 630, 640, their score is going to go up, but very, very slowly, because that's the only thing that you have. So if you're paying on time every month, there's nothing else for the score to be weighted except for history.
Right.
So you just have to wait.
Mix.
Yeah.
You need a good mix.
So you need a mix. So the second type of credit is called a revolving line of credit, right? So that could be a credit card. It can be a firm. How a firm does it now is not, it could be. Some of them are installments.
Okay.
Some of them are, like, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So
I threw you off.
I was
My
going to
bad.
say, no, because I don't want to say don't use a firm, but don't use a firm, right? And
Dang. Babe. Our vacations.
and if you can manage it well and it makes sense. So
Okay.
sometimes there's 0%, right?
Right,
So if
right.
you have good credit and they're using it, but then I have other people, if you're putting your Chipotle on a firm, we probably
Bro,
want to
for
have a different conversation.
Right. We
And
can't
you
be
come to
putting
see us for
eyelashes on a
budgeting. Yeah.
firm. Yeah.
So, but yeah,
right.
so those things are now starting to report, which they didn't used to.
Okay.
Which could be helpful for some,
Okay.
but detrimental for others. So I'm kind of on the fence. I want to see how
It
it
depends on the
impacts it.
person.
Yes,
Once
it
again,
depends on the
everybody's
person.
situation is different.
But your credit cards, lines of credit, those are called revolving. When you have those two, that creates a good mix. And that's that. So if payment history is 35, having that credit card or revolving line of credit now has that other 30% of the score to calculate, which is typically where you see the biggest growth and where you see the biggest swings, because how those balances are reporting is what you're impacted. But so you got utilization, you have payment history, you have time, so how long you've had credit, you have the credit types, right? So and mortgages impacted a different way, which helps. So a mortgage is a bigger impact when you have a mortgage line of credit. And then the last one is what they call as new credit. And it's not really new credit, it's your inquiries. So the amount of times that you apply for credit, that impacts it depending on the bureau between 5 or 10%.
Right.
And so that's it. Those are the it's the 5 kind of buckets. The 2 biggest buckets are utilization and payment history. And then you have the amount, how long you've had credit. So your average credit age. So the longer and more experienced individuals, that's when I usually see the 800s. Is those people who've had credit and they've managed credit well for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right? They have a lot of history and it's a lot of positive history. That's where you get those really big scores. And then you have the types of credit. So you want to see multiple lines, all of those multiple lines and different types of credit being managed well. And then you're not applying for things unnecessarily. So you talked about going to TJ Maxx, and they're trying to apply for a card. It's like, oh, do you want 5% off? No, because every time you
Yeah.
apply for that
Yeah.
credit card, it's going to impact your
That's
score.
where they get so many people and young people.
Yes.
Because kids are like, oh my God, I'm going to save $10. Sure, run my credit. And they don't know that like they weren't trained on how
Yes.
to take care of that in most cases. And so now they forgot to pay it off. Now they've already got a collection. So thank you for going over the mix of things. Let me back up. I don't want to get too crazy. And once again, this is a live broadcast. If you guys have questions, feel free to ask them. So there's that, but everybody's situation is different. We talk about that all the time. I get people who say, Alyssa, you know, I should just pay off all my debt and close all my credit cards, and that'll help me. And I'm like, ooh, I can't tell you what to do because your specific, it's like an x-ray.
Right.
Everybody's
100%.
x-ray is different, right? Like your x-ray of your finances is so different. When we're looking inside compared to the outside, you're going to see something different than what you might say, oh, my cousin did this and, you know, my friend did that and that helped them. Once again, you need to talk to a professional, right? Everybody's situation is different. So a lot of people, though, to backtrack, will say, I'm just going to pay off all my debt. I'm going to close all my credit cards. And that's going to boost it because I'm not going to have any. And I'm like, wait, be careful because the length.
Length is the most important. And if there's nothing open, there's nothing to report. And you actually have a 0 credit score.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what we would encourage you to do, what I would encourage you to do if you were to sit down, you know, with me and one of my reps would say, hey, yeah, pay all those credit cards off. Because every time you report them and the balance is 100% available, that's phenomenal. So I'm not one of those people who tell you you need to carry a 30% balance at all the time. No, if you can keep those credit cards at 0 or reporting at 0, do it. And then don't use them. Now, if you're afraid you don't have self-control, this is where we need to use our network, right? Do you have a friend that you trust? Because you want to have it because maybe there's an emergency. So you want to be able to access it, but it's like under these circumstances,
Yeah.
do you give me the credit card? You have people who put their credit card in a block of ice.
Yeah.
So what they do is they have a cooling down period. If I am so in need that I have to let this thing defrost, then by the time it defrosts, do I still want to go get what it was that I wanted? Or am I good? And a lot of times that's what we need when we know thyself is, okay, in the moment I'm being triggered, right? If you shop out of, every time something good happens, I shop. Or every time I'm sad, I shop,
shopping,
right?
yeah.
Emotional shopping. These are different techniques when you meet. What we try and do, to your point, and I love the analogy about the x-ray, is figure out what are your goals. That's what we start with. I'm going to say something. Everyone doesn't need to have a 700 credit score. And some people may never have it, right? What are your goals? What are your financial goals? And then how do we create a plan in order to help you as the individual achieve their financial goals? And that's going to inform how we advise you. That's how, in my opinion, it's one thing to just say, don't do that. But if you tell me, hey, which a lot of business owners, I need the cash, right? I'm running a business that takes receivables, and I have a lot of money that I have to expend before I can actually be paid back. Because their utilization is high, they may not ever cross a 700, right? But they need to do that in order to function and run their business. And so that's I hope I answered that question.
No, you did.
Yeah, it's like focusing on the individual, figuring out what your goals were, not just paying off a credit card to say I paid it off. That could be a great goal. I think it's phenomenal. But yes, you want to keep those credit lines open because if you close them, you essentially lose the history. That's why some people will pay off a car. And I don't know if I've had people come to me and they pay off a car and they're like, why did my score drop? That's why. It's because you no longer have that positive every month payment reporting. And so your score drops temporarily because you lost that. If it's a 5 or even 6 or now sometimes 7-year-old loan, you had 7 years of history that now is no longer on your credit report and you can see a slight dip.
Wow. So we went over the entire pie of what makes up your credit score. And that was really good. I want to transition into if somebody is looking to, and if you see comments that I'm not seeing, please let me know. To the girl's point about Credit Karma. A lot of people ask me, well, where do I find my credit score? Because I'm hearing that Credit Karma is inaccurate and I'm hearing Experience the best. And can I boost it on Experience? Like, what would you say, based on your expertise, is the best place to find your truest credit scores?
If you want to pay for it, any of the bureaus will allow you to pay to to see your credit score. Even with Credit Karma is not an accurate scoring tool, although for me it is accurate within 10 points, either up or down. It is a, how can I put it?
It's like a simulator, right?
Yeah, they try and not guess. They kind of know how it's weighted. They know how the credit bureau is weighted, and they give you what is a suggested score. It's a predictive tool. That's what it is.
Predictive tool.
So based on the behaviors that they're seeing and how they understand the credit scores to behave, that's proprietary information, because a lot of people don't understand it either. The credit bureaus are privately owned. So that's a whole nother conversation, but it's proprietary information. So what Credit Karma does is it says, based on how we understand credit cards to report and your behaviors, if you keep doing this, this is where your score will go. And so what typically happens is somebody sees their score jump by 50 points and they think that my score is today 50 points higher than it was, and they go out and apply for a bunch of different things, and maybe they come back and they're at a 630 or 620. It's not that Credit Karma was wrong, it's that the score hadn't actually caught up with the behavior. So Credit Karma is predicting that if you keep managing credit in this way, your score will increase to
so it could be a little off.
Yeah, it can be off, but that's typically wise. You're just moving faster, because the opposite could be true. Credit Karma you had a late payment, and Credit Karma shows that you dropped 75 points. And then when you actually go and get it pulled, it may not have actually been that big of an impact. But what Credit Karma is saying, if you keep doing these behaviors, this is where your score is headed based on how they understand the credit bureaus to work. So any of them are good. All of the information should be accurate. So even though Credit Karma's score is not accurate, if they're showing a trade line is open, if they're showing a late payment or a missed payment, they're only showing what has been reported to the bureaus. I think the statistic is something like over 60% of consumers have at least one error on their credit report.
Yeah.
So if it's something that's showing wrong on Credit Karma, then you want to make sure that you are getting that corrected with one of the three bureaus, which is Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. So we didn't talk about that. There are three credit bureaus: Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Banks typically will choose one, and it's kind of dealer's choice as to what they choose and why they choose it. But I know you might want to speak to when someone's applying for a mortgage, what that means.
So the way banks do it and the way the lenders do it, I mean, mortgage lenders do it is a little different. The mortgage lenders pull all three scores, and they look at the average, and they actually take the lower. Typically, they take the lower, I think, right?
Middle.
The middle. They take the middle score.
The middle.
So you might have on Equifax, a 700, and the other one is 6, and the other one is, a 680. You think the mortgage lender is going to pull the 7 because it's the highest one, but they're going to take the 680. They're going to take the middle. But that, everything's different whether you're applying for an auto loan or whether you're applying for a credit card. So yeah, that's very true.
Yeah, and that's why it's important that while you can pay, I don't personally suggest, and it's not a plug, but my organization, the institution BCU, actually has a free credit monitoring tool, and it's a predictive tool. Just like the other ones, it's going to that information is going to be relevant. So there are so many free places for you to access it. And what a lot of people do is focus on the score. Don't focus on the score. Focus on what it is showing. So even on Credit Karma and at BCU's ON tool, it gives you ratings. Like usually they have a letter score that says for your utilization, are you at an A, B, C, D, or F? If you're at a C, that's impacting your score. How do you keep making that and improving? If it's at a D for payment history, again, doesn't matter what the score is showing. You want to start to see that payment history improve, and you stop having things report more than 30 days late.
Yeah.
So focus on what it's saying more so than you are focusing on the score.
And get the notification.
Yes.
I can't stress that enough because, I was impacted by somebody who pretended to be me. AI, all these things with the internet, they're like, oh, she's got great credit. And I got the notification and I handled it right then and there. It's when you let it lag.
Yeah,
and
don't ignore.
Yeah.
Don't ignore. I love that point. Yeah, don't ignore the things. Sign up for the thing. So I won't recommend one specific tool. But again, most of the bureaus are now, because they are privately owned companies, allowing individuals to pay to access the score. The Experian Boost, again,
Yeah.
I'm not against it. It's too new for me to have an opinion. Is because I don't understand how for a fee.
Yeah. You can make my
credit
credit
score. Again, I don't love how that
Right,
that
right.
is, but
Yeah.
some people have used it to different having different success. But for me, is again, don't focus on the score. Focus on what that information is that's listed. And if everything is listed as positively, your score is probably even higher than what it is that they're telling you. And always know that it's going to be plus or minus 10 to 20 is what we kind of call the swing. So.
Absolutely. Tina said Credit Karma is good for real-time notifications of things happening on your
Same,
credit.
yep.
100%. Another thing that, because credit is like 30% of my life, I feel like, because I'm just always battling against it with people who just were not taught, just like me. Another thing that people say is, well, I make my car payment, or my cell phone payment on time, and I make my ComEd payment on time. Why isn't that affected? Why doesn't that go towards my credit?
Well, you had State Rep Rita Mayfield on there. Yeah, those are the things that's above us, right? What is counted on a credit score are trade lines. Now, just like medical bills. So if you pay your medical bills on time, it never shows up in your credit report. But if you don't pay that medical bill and it charges off or goes to collections, then it posts. Same thing with ComEd, North Shore Gas. So there are some legislation that says, hey, you should be receiving credit for that. And I think it could be positive. There are even websites or businesses now that will get those trade lines to report for you. I always go, especially I'm always conservative with minority communities, is because I think sometimes people are balancing a lot of things. And if you're someone who does not pay your ComEd on the 30-day, on the due date, because you're having to balance things, that could actually be more harmful than positive. But overall, what they're looking at are open trade lines, people that you have credit agreements with. You can pay yourself at a very nominal fee or if your landlord agrees to have your rent counted. And so there are programs or things that you can do like that, but you as the consumer have to take that on yourself,
and
because
ask,
it's not
going
just
to be an automatic thing. And that's something they're like, wait a minute, but I pay them. And I'm like, but if you were on top of your credit, you would have seen, you're right. And so we're going to transition a little bit into one of my favorite things that we like to talk about with you specifically, because you taught it to me. And I thought it was such a great tool, because we see it all the time on Facebook, and, disclosure, not everything's for everybody, right? Once again, but we see it all the time where people are struggling with their credit, and they might go on Facebook on the timeline and they see a post of somebody's credit score with the little arrow going from 6 to now 8, and they're like, so-and-so got my credit score up in 20 days. Go follow them and pay. So there's people out there who say that they're credit repair specialists. And especially when you have a goal in mind.
Yes.
Like a house, you can be so susceptible to be like, yes, I'm going to go pay this person. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, and maybe potentially the dangers? I don't want to say dangers, but just, I'm going to let you take the floor on that.
No, so there are a lot of different companies that will call themselves credit repair. You'll never hear me refer to it as credit repair. We do credit coaching. I can tell you what I refer to as the legal and ethical way in order to move your credit score over time. There are things that people will do which could maybe give you a temporary boost, but are not sustainable long term. And one of them, there's a company, which I won't say because I don't want to get sued, right? But what they do is they will say, hey, come on, we'll get all of the negative things removed from your credit. Well, I always question how can they do that, is because the way that it works is if there's something that's inaccurate, each of the credit bureaus allows you to make a dispute. So a dispute, you can say, hey, I paid this on time and here's my proof. Or this was forgiven and this is the email I received that told me, if I gave them $500, they would remove it. So that is a dispute. Disputes are 100% legal. When you file a dispute, while the item is under dispute, it is removed from your credit temporarily. If the person who gave the credit, so the bank or credit union in this instance, or credit card company, doesn't respond, it's removed. If they agree with your dispute, that, hey, you're right, they correct the information, or it's removed. But if they show, no, Alyssa told me she was going to pay me back, and Alyssa didn't, and here's the proof that she didn't, then it gets put back on the report. What some people do is they'll say, hey, you pay me $8.95, $12.95, $48 a month, and I'm going to, and I'm taking care of your credit. And all that they're doing is continually filing disputes, right? And so then what they do is they tell you to go apply for new credit. So the new credit that you're applying for, if you take care of it, it could boost your credit. What they should be doing is giving you a window to try and get new positive things reported.
Yeah. Wow.
But what happens is they've told you that those things are removed. Your score shoots up. You say, well, why am I paying them $8, $12, $45 a month? My score has improved. I don't want to pay them anymore. So you cancel the subscription, do whatever. All they do is they stop filing disputes. If those items were legitimate, they come back on the credit score. So typically what you had was someone's like, oh, they got my score up to 680. Then they stopped paying. And now they're like, my score's back down to 550. And why is because what they were doing, you could also do. Right?
For
so
free,
really,
free.
I don't recommend it. That's
Yeah.
not the right way to go about it.
Right.
But if you wanted to,
Yeah, especially
could
if it
do it
really is
yourself.
legit,
Yeah.
if it's really a proper dispute. But a lot of people take that dispute, but in for anything that's, it is real, and they're just hoping that it'll fall off or say it's not me, or whatever the case may be. But a lot of the times it comes back and it sticks there.
And it sticks there and it starts over. So negative items can stay in your credit report for 7 years. So what that means is if you had like people, because I have that. You're like, oh, my credit sucks. And I'm like, well, when's the last time you applied for a car? Like, when I was 19. How old are you now? I'm 32. Like,
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff has already fallen off, right?
Yeah,
so
7
we can
years,
7
right?
years. But if you make contact, that resets the clock. And so
Yeah.
if you filed a dispute, that item and that information can now stay on there even longer. So it's very important that before you go to a credit repair specialist or someone like that, you understand what it is that they're doing, how they're doing it, and how it could impact you.
And how far along you are in it. Because if you're, a month away, 6 years, 11 months away, and you contact the creditor, or they do that dispute or whatever, and it was going to fall off in a month, now you just restarted
The clock.
the entire 7 years, bro. 7 years is a long
It's a
time.
long time.
This has been so good. So we went over, what makes a credit score. We went over what the disputes kind of look like from quote unquote credit repair specialists. Is there anything that you would like to say to people before the podcast kind of ends, or any other gems?
Yeah, like I said, don't be afraid. I love it's a no judgment zone. You don't know what you don't know. And so the organization I work for, BCU, they're local here in Northern Illinois. I know people are watching from all over. But we do have what are called certified financial coaches. They will meet with you to assess your individual situation and kind of create a plan for you. So there is not a one size fits all. But what I will say is if you start tomorrow, just talk to somebody. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay if your score is not where you want it to be, but you can turn it around. And so, like you said, Alyssa shared her own personal testimony. I know that's my testimony as well. Our friend Carlos says, if you knew better, you would do better.
Yeah,
and really,
shut up,
that's
Carlos.
what it comes down to. If you do know better, then you can do better. So I would encourage anybody to not be afraid to start asking questions, because even if I said a bunch of terms today that you're like, I don't understand what that means, it's not as complicated, and it's not as scary when you actually understand it.
And it's good to take hold of it, your financial health. I'm going to backtrack really quick because Alejandro said, wait, so if I dispute something, it resets it?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
If you dispute it and it's not,
if you win the dispute, it comes off. If you don't, and they found you, I don't like to say guilty of it, but if they found that is yours and that what you're saying is not, your dispute isn't necessarily worthy of, I don't know how to say
Accurate,
it with right,
yeah.
it's not accurate, then it is going to start that whole process over. So make sure that you're understanding the time frame that's been on there. That's a huge thing. Everyone's out there disputing, and I'm like, it was almost going to fall off, and you wanted to just try it because a credit repair person told you. So yes.
And sometimes the reasons can impact your relationship. Like I know I had someone who had a legitimate, they had signed for a car. And then the credit repair specialist sent a dispute saying that they had never signed for this car. They didn't know what it was. They had the car loan for 2 years. So now, as the financial institution, I know we think they are just entities. No, they're beings, right? Or
Right.
According to the
They're real
Supreme
people.
Court, they're
Yeah.
people. I guess but what happened is they respond. And so that person lost their ability to do banking with that company.
Institution,
So they said, we're closing your checking account. We're closing the different things.
Try to do us bogus. We fund do
Yeah,
you.
we produced a document showing that you did sign for it. So once this loan is completed, you no longer can have a relationship with that financial institution. So it's really important to be careful with what you're saying in the disputes and that it is accurate and legitimate, is because they have to respond. And so if you're accusing a company or organization,
fraud. Yeah.
That's not a small thing, right? And they're going to dispute it and they're going to fight it, and there may be repercussions outside of just a denied dispute claim through the credit bureau. So it's really important. That's why I say my team will show you the ethical and legitimate way to raise a credit score, because there are a lot of things that go on that people don't really understand. Everything that they're doing, everything that they're signing, everything that somebody tells you to do is not necessarily always ethical. And sometimes can even be illegal.
Somebody, if somebody's charging you to quote unquote fix your credit, be wary of that. What are they doing? What exactly? Because this is your lifeline potentially to some financial freedom, right?
And there's so many free resources out there.
So many free resources, and I'll talk about BCU. I mean, they didn't sponsor this, right? This is not a paid promotion by BCU. I'm talking from my own experience. I went to Brandon because Brandon would always talk about credit health, and I'm like, dang, I got once again practice what I preach with my real estate. I want to buy investment properties. I know it doesn't matter how much money I put down, my credit has to speak for itself, right? So when I went over there, credit score was shot, dude. It was so bad. I had collections up the yin yang. You told me what to do, and my friend Logan Breen also told me what to do. He was great, and I did it. And we repaired it within a year and a half. And now I'm able to get whatever I want. I put the things I need, and I'm consistently buying on my credit card. I get points back. My Sam's Club credit card is amazing. 3%, like I get money back for eating at places, and it just so your financial health is so important. And if you're looking for a free resource, if you're trying to see what does my financial X-ray look like, then go to BCU.
And my last comment is around what it means. Is so, and we'll give generalities. So most what do you call it? Creditors, right? Mortgage lenders will approve you with a 620. If your minimum score is 620, that's kind of the bare minimum to entry. However, let's say, and these are old interest rates, so if someone had a 4%, so you came to me with a 620, and I gave you a 6% interest rate. Not 420, I'm sorry, 620, and I gave you a 4% interest rate. And somebody else came to me with a 700, and I'm confusing my analogies.
You're good.
So let me reset. If somebody came to me, they had a 620, we approved them for a mortgage, and I gave them a 6% interest rate. Somebody else, let's say they came to me, they have over a 700, and I approved them, and I give them a 4% interest rate. It's only 2% different. If you take a $350,000 home and you go over 30 years, the difference in monthly payment is $300 a month. So the person that had a 620 still got the mortgage, right? But they paid 2% higher. It was only 2%. They're paying $300 on average more a month. Now, over 30 years, the difference is $149,000.
That's an investment property.
So when you talk about the wealth gap, a lot of it comes down to an information gap. It doesn't mean that the person didn't get the mortgage. It doesn't mean that they didn't get the house. It meant that they had less liquid cash available each month in order to put into their retirement, to save for their kids, college fund, whatever it is, to pay for college. Because that's equity that they weren't building as quickly as the other homeowner. And then when they sold, they didn't make back as much as they invested. And that's 2%. And so anything
2%.
we can do in order to get your score higher before you make that purchase, I always say don't wait until you're in the perfect situation. But if you know that you want to purchase in a year, talk to us now. It's
Yeah.
because if you're 640, there may be some very small tweaks that we can do that will put you in a much better position. And so I tell everybody, it's like sometimes a low credit score doesn't even mean no. It's the cost of being poor.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's like, hey, I got a car. This person's paying 3% on their car loan. This person's paying 12.
Yeah.
That's real money.
Like, yeah, you guys both got the car, but what the amount is 100%. That's so true.
So
got me all
that was
hyped.
it.
that is so good. And the other thing about BCU too, talking about cars, I'm a quick little plug. I'm just gonna put this out there for you guys. Take this how you want. Once again, not a financial advisor, but I've learned to go to my credit union and get pre-approved for my vehicle prior to going to the dealerships. You guys always give me a better interest rate. Typically no payments for like
60 to 90
60
days.
to 90 days, not having a car payment for 90 days. So when you start like learning and going to these places, specifically credit union instead of a bank, right? You're going to learn a little bit more about just how to fix your score. You're going to also learn how to shop correctly, how to find the best rates.
And that's what I say. It's holistic. I can only speak for my organization is because everybody doesn't have the same goals. And that's what we start off with. And so whatever brings you in the door, you want to buy a Maserati, I'm not going to talk you out of it. But if you want to do that, this is how much it costs. Does it take you away from the other things that you said you want to do, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to prioritize. That's what life is about. So we can help you and definitely appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk with you about credit. I'll be honest because I get a lot of demands. I'm around, but new title, I'm the Director of Community Retail Branches. So I don't currently take appointments, but I have a team of experienced certified financial coaches who do take credit consultation appointments as well as budgeting, and then they can help you with any of your other loan needs. If you're looking for a car, even if you're looking for a mortgage, we have a very like I say, skilled people who can help you with those
secured
things.
credit cards too.
We
you guys,
it's so much.
Everything.
That's what I'm saying.
So
we
much.
touch the
I got to
surface.
give a huge shout out to BCU. Love them. Before we end this podcast, where can they find and book an appointment? What locations you guys have?
Everything's online, bcu.org. And so if you click on community, you'll find kind of our 6 local branches: Kenosha, Gurnee, Libertyville, Vernon Hills, Lake Zurich, and Crystal Lake. If you stop at any of those locations or click on that community page, you can also schedule an appointment.
Brandon, I loved having you on. This was so good. This is literally just the tip of the
Yeah,
iceberg.
I know, but we got the great conversation.
We got some good stuff out there for you guys. If you liked this podcast, share it. You could also watch it on YouTube. Share it with a friend. Go follow Brandon if you haven't already. Brandon Ewing, great person to kind of just watch what he's doing on Facebook, all over. He's wonderful. I'm proud to call him my friend. And before we end this, I want to once again give a special shout out to ProTax LLC. I got to get them on here to talk about taxes, because that's another thing, especially when we're talking about business owners. But once again, shout out to them. They sponsored today's episode, ProTax LLC. They do ITIN number applications as well, notary services, travel consent letters. They're more than just a tax company, but if you haven't filed your taxes, it's never too late to start. You can reach out to them now at 847-246-8033. Once again, shout out RF39 Productions for helping us. And thank you again, Brandon, for coming on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a good one.
Hello?
Turn it up loud, but bring them all out. Turn it up loud, but bring them all out. Turn it up loud, but